Hey everybody, happy Tuesday and welcome to another Techstrong TV broadcast. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon. Today is Tuesday, May 10th, and we are solidly into springtime here in South Florida. I hope everybody's having great weather wherever you are, but we have a great lineup on today's Techstrong TV. We get things kicked off today with a conversation between Alan and Barak Haddad, who is the head of research over at Armis. Armis recently discovered 5 vulnerabilities in the implementation of TLS communications in multiple models of Aruba and Avaya switches. And the vulnerabilities actually stem from a similar design flaw that was identified in the TLS storm vulnerabilities that were discovered earlier this year by Armis. And they expand the reach of TLS storm to potentially millions of additional enterprise-grade network infrastructure devices. This is a call to action to organizations that have Avaya or Aruba switches, understanding what the vulnerabilities are in TLS communications and how they can fix it. It is a great conversation and very worthwhile, especially if you have those communication switches. After that, Alan has a conversation with Thomas LaRock, who is the head geek over at SolarWinds. They talk about SolarWinds' new hybrid cloud observability platform, which is able to detect productivity and security anomalies, as well as identify issues and take automated remediation actions to maximize productivity, prevent security issues, and reduce costs. This is a great technology, especially in the era of hybrid and remote work. Definitely something your organization wants to check out. It's a great conversation as well. After that, we've got DevOps Unbound. This is one of our many series here on Techstrong TV, and this one is about hyperscale DevOps and how organizations can get there. So in this conversation, we have Mitch Ashley, who is the host. He's joined by Tracy Reagan from Deploy Hub, Parag Doshi from Tricentis, and Larry Macaron from Contrast Security. They discuss DevOps at hyperscale, how enterprise scale versus what the difference is between enterprise scale and startup scale, and how organizations can set up a hyperscale environment and how to test at hyperscale. A lot of hyperscale information in this one, so definitely want to check it out if your organization is thinking about ways that they can improve the DevOps speed even further. It's a great conversation. After that, we have the Something Old segment. This one is from the recent Secure Software Summit. This has James Chiappetta, who is the Senior Vice President of Cybersecurity over at Blackstone. His presentation is titled, "What Happens After You Shift Security Left?" What happens indeed? There are so many things. But 2 of the most common attack vectors for organizations and the importance of threat modeling are the 2 main topics of his presentation. Inside out and outside in. Those are the 2 most important attack vectors. So he runs the gamut in his presentation, everything from establishing a continuous improvement process that is founded with threat modeling in mind and defining what it means to be an innovative cybersecurity leader and how to get started. He also goes into why vulnerability class elimination should become an outcome of continuous improvement and innovation. Definitely another one of those great presentations worth checking out. After that, I'm back. I've got the news headlines for you. And then I have a conversation with Jose Costa, who is the Chief Information Security Officer over at Tugboat Logic by OneTrust. We discuss the benefits of making cybersecurity training a priority across job roles. As we all know, and we've been talking about for a long time, that cybersecurity is not just the purview of the security team. It really is everybody within the organization should be in charge of security as well. Definitely a cross-organizational job role. So Jose and I talk about why this is so important to improve cybersecurity across an entire organization. After that, I've got the webinar's preview for you, and then we round things out with The View with Vizard. And in this one, Mike Vizard is speaking with Pete Morgan, who is the president of Phylum, and they discuss how the recent $15 million that Phylum received in funding will be applied to automating software supply chain security. Good stuff there. It's a great technology as well. All right, that's today's lineup. It's a good one, folks. I hope you'll stick around for the entirety, and we're going to get things kicked off right after these commercial messages.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
All right, we are back and kicking off today's Techstrong TV broadcast. We've got a conversation between Alan and Barak Haddad, who is the head of research over at Armis. They are talking about new vulnerabilities that Armis discovered in the implementation of TLS communications in multiple models of Avaya and Aruba switches. This is very, very important because it stems from a similar design flaw that was identified in the TLS Storm vulnerabilities discovered earlier this year. And they actually expand the reach of TLS Storm to potentially millions of additional enterprise-grade network infrastructure devices. So definitely a conversation worth checking out. Lots of takeaways in this one. And especially if you have these switches, it's definitely one you want to check out. So let's go ahead and roll it now.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back here to Techstrong TV. I have a guest. It's actually a first-time guest here on Techstrong TV. His name is Barak Haddad. And Barak, welcome to Techstrong TV.
Very nice to be here. Hi, Alan.
Nice to have you. So, Barak, I didn't mention that you are from Aramis. Or, is it pronounced Aramis or Aramis?
Armis.
Armis. Okay.
Yes.
And Armis is I first actually became aware of Armis. I was at an Inside Ignite event up in Iceland. And I think it was your CEO, co-founder at the time, was there. It was right around the time when you guys had announced that Insight was going to become an investor in Aramis and Armis, and I, became familiar with the company then. Of course, since then, you guys have really become a powerhouse in IoT cybersecurity, and one of the leading players in the world in it. And we've had the pleasure of having a number of people from Aramis on the show over the last months and years. So you're following a good company there, and welcome here. What exactly is it you do there, Barak?
So I'm the head of research at Armis. It means that I'm responsible of a group of researchers that do all sorts of reverse engineering and threat detection. We look under the hood of embedded devices and try to find vulnerabilities or just understand how they work, so our system can understand their protocols, etc., on the network.
Excellent. Very good. And it's all about research recently, and certainly Aramis has developed an amazing research team when it comes to these type of embedded device vulnerabilities and attacks and what we're seeing in the wild. So, congratulations to you for heading that team up. For our audience out there, they're looking at you and saying, wow, this guy heads a threat research team. How did he get there? How, give people aspiring threat researchers, give them a little pointer.
So I started in IT, actually, changing ports, etc. Then moved to being a developer, had my degree in electrical engineering, from a developer, I became a team lead, then changed to a researcher, research team lead, and now head of research. And like had fun doing all of that way. And even today, the technical skills from IT still serve for many research projects. So it started really on the electrical side of things.
Yeah, no, you started in hardware and stuff like that, and and then went into development where, when we look at the cybersecurity world today, right? We oftentimes have a shortage of people who have cybersecurity skills, but come at it from sort of a developer point of view, right? So when I'm in security, we didn't call it cyber. I'm in security 25, 30 years. Most of the people I knew back then when I first started and came up who were in security, we called it InfoSec, who were in InfoSec really came from the network side of the house. Right, they were people already working on routers and switches, and and then so when firewalls came out, that was kind of the natural thing. It went in at the router, it sat there, and then internal firewalls. So that kind of generation of security folks were network people for the most part. Now we see different, right? We see application security folks. We see people who have gone to school for cyber, and then we see the whole embedded device security. Yeah,
so our group of researchers, actually, we have a very diverse group of researchers. Some of the researchers' expertise is in electrical engineering. Some are extremely good software developers. Some know Windows really well. Some know Linux. Some just embedded devices. And we work together to understand how all of these communicate. And I think that even today, the network understanding is crucial for security researchers, because that's like the basics. All of the interconnections between different devices, different networks. That's the basic way for an attacker to work. So as defenders, we need to understand that as well.
Absolutely. And I think to have a good research team, you can't all be experts in the same thing. You need to have that well-rounded sort of thing, because you don't know. You never know where this next attack surface is, or where the next attack's coming from, and what the vector is. Anyway, that brings us to kind of what we want to talk about today, which is a recent discovery that you and the team came across and have brought out to the world. Why don't you share with our audience a little bit?
Yeah, so TL Storm, that's the name of that project. It's actually an ongoing project. It started more than 6 months ago. We started looking at smart UPS devices by APC. We found different vulnerabilities. Some of them are criticals, and that allow an attacker to gain control of these UPS devices from the internet in some cases, and change the way they behave. And even we've demonstrated that on some conference that from the internet, we were able to attack a UPS device and make the UPS fry itself on stage. So that was the first part of that research. And the root cause of some of these vulnerabilities was a misuse of a library called NanoSSL, which is a library that does TLS communication, encrypted communication. And we were thinking, okay, that seems like a simple misuse, an error that I would have been able to make as a developer, because it's software has lots of aspects. Sometimes developers forget to check specific errors, or just use an API not the way it was meant to be used. So we've started looking at other devices that use the same library, NanoSSL. We have a knowledge base in our company of over 2 billion devices. So we had a way to understand which devices are using these libraries. We found these extremely common switches by Aruba and Avaya that use the same library. And we've started digging in, looking under the hood, and found that they have very similar type of vulnerabilities. So the bugs, the vulnerabilities are almost identical in some cases, but this time the implications are completely different. For the UPS devices, the implications were taking down a UPS. By the way, UPS is an uninterruptible power supply. So taking down the power to the devices that are connected to it, or just changing the mechanism that generates the power wave, the signal. But for switches, it's a completely different type of effect. An attacker can change the configuration of the switch. And since switches are the devices that are responsible for segmentation in the network, changing VLANs, things like that. So an attacker could change its own VLAN, move to other segment of the network, and move, let's say, from the guest network to the corporate network. And now the attacker has access to some asset that he didn't have access to before. So it's the same type of bugs, but completely different implications.
Excellent. That's it's the first time I've heard something like that, where you're using, in essence, it's the same defect or bug or vulnerability, but depending on where it's applied, you have, different application, if you will, different kind of consequences. So you guys came across this, and as you mentioned, it's been ongoing now for 6 months. There are bugs, and then there are bugs that have exploits in the wild. Have you observed exploits in the wild on this yet?
So to the best of our knowledge, there are no exploits in the wild. We've also followed the responsible disclosure procedures. So we've been talking with the vendors. Some of the models have patches. For others, there are configuration changes that can limit the attack surface significantly. So I'm glad to say that until now, we didn't see attacks in the wild.
That's great. And now, because you followed responsible disclosure procedures, vulnerable devices, as you mentioned, either have to patch or some other type of configuration change, which kind of, throttles down the exploit or the ability to exploit this. One of the things that I find interesting, Barak, is when you talk to, especially to non-security people, they're like, oh, good, they found this one, they closed it down, we could sleep easy now, right? We go rest easy. But no, much like what we've seen with like the Log4js and these kinds of vulnerabilities, and let's be clear, a lot of times we call them vulnerabilities or bugs. They're defects, they're design defects, right? And there's no, just because we found this one doesn't mean that there's not another one. In fact, probably likely there's another one lurking, right? Only waiting to be found. And I go ahead.
So for this type of vulnerability, since we've already found it for 3 different vendors, 3 different devices, we talked with Mokana, the company that makes NanoSSL, even though the bug is not in their code, since it's a misusage of their code, they also changed their code so that similar bugs in the future, similar misusages will not cause the same type of effect. So at least in the future, we will be protected from that, even for devices that we didn't look into. And also they released an advisory that says specifically how vendors should use their code and how to detect that misusage. So this will not happen again for other devices. But yeah, there are always different vulnerabilities. No developer is perfect, and there are always bugs. And that's why security is always done in layers. So the first layer, obviously, is patching. If you know about a vulnerability, patch, because you don't want to be you don't want the attack surface to be exploited. But the second phase is limiting the attack surface, and that's done through configuration, changing, let's say, for these types of vulnerabilities, if we're talking about via switches, the vulnerabilities are in the management portal. So limiting the access to the management portal, changing the ports that can access this portal to the minimal, limits significantly the attack surface. So an attacker that's connected to a port that doesn't have access to the management portal will not be able to exploit these vulnerabilities. If we're talking about the UPS devices, so these devices connect automatically to the internet, and that same communication can be used to infiltrate the network. If you're not using all of the smart features of the UPS, just disconnect it. And you have one attack surface less, which can make your network more secure. And lastly, monitoring, active monitoring. It's like the guard on the entrance. You have a door, but adding a guard to that door also adds a layer of security. So all of that together really puts the attacker in disadvantage and lets you protect your network.
Very cool. Excellent stuff. Barak, so this is really kind of the latest disclosure that your team, or the latest, kind of bug your team has found. Just to give our audience a sense, can you give us some other kind of vulnerabilities and findings that the research team has done recently?
Yeah, so we do all sorts of different projects. We usually just look into the devices that are most popular in our client base. So our last research before this one was into medical devices, and we've found a set of vulnerabilities that impact medical devices. Before that, we found a set of vulnerabilities for VxWorks, which is an operating system that's extremely common for mission-critical devices, medical equipment, equipment that's used in factories, things like that. Even on some space devices, like the Land Rover on Mars also uses VxWorks. So we always look on different devices and try to understand how they work. That's the first phase, and then see if they have some bugs in them that should be patched.
Excellent. Hey, we're almost out of time. For people who maybe want to find out more about this particular research that you guys have done and affected devices, etc., any place on the Aramis website to send them to?
Yeah, so we have 2 pages for the 2 different phases of this research. The first one is aramis.com/TLStorm. The second one is aramis.com/TLStorm2. And there's also a white paper for people that want to go really deep into the technical details. It's, I think, 40 pages long. Very deep technical white paper. If people want to read it, we welcome that. It goes in great detail to the specifics of each vulnerability. Excellent.
Barak, thank you so much for appearing today on Techstrong TV. It's great to have you on here. Yeah, no, our pleasure. Good work on this one, man. Keep vigilant, keep us safe and protected. Come back and keep us posted as well. Barak Haddad, director of the research team over at Aramis. We're going to take a break here on Techstrong TV. We'll be right back.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
All right, we're back. Next up, Alan talks with Thomas LaRock, who's the head geek over at SolarWinds. SolarWinds recently launched a new hybrid cloud observability platform, which is able to detect productivity and security anomalies, identify issues, and take automated remediation actions to maximize productivity, prevent security issues, and reduce costs. Great technology, especially in today's new ways of working. And Alan and Thomas go in at length about the technology. So let's go ahead and roll it now.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Techstrong TV. I'm really happy to introduce you to a first-time guest on our show today, Thomas LaRock, or LaRock. If I said it wrong, Thomas, I apologize. Thomas, is that the right way to say it?
It is. It is. It used to be more French, but we had a falling out with the church like 150 years ago, the family tells me. So we made it English, LaRock.
Got it. Okay. A little family history there. So, Thomas, and you know, you have a rather unusual title. I should mention you're with SolarWinds. And yes. Why don't you tell people what's your role and title at SolarWinds?
Yes, I work for SolarWinds. My title is head geek, and you should just think of that as a technical advocate. I am the brand ambassador for the company, for our portfolio of products.
That's cool. Thomas, I've been in technology for 25, 30 years, InfoSec and cybersecurity for 20, 25 years. And it's interesting to me. So there was no, forget head geek, there was no really evangelist advocate titles back then. As a matter of fact, most organizations, you had sort of two different kinds of CTO. You had the internal CTO, who's kind of like a VP of engineering CTO. And then you had an external CTO, who really was he was the head geek. And too often it was he, not she. You didn't see many female CTOs. But that role was the person who was advocate, evangelizing, kind of face of the company.
Yep.
Right? But at the same time, we also hired so many salespeople and enterprise salespeople, very high-priced enterprise salespeople, who would like wine and dine and do these 180-day sales cycles, to try to sell enterprise software to the enterprise. Today, of course, it's a different world. We've got people like you, right, who are talking to your customers, not necessarily to the CFO or the guy who signs the check, but you're talking geek to geek with these folks, right? Because you understand their role, their life, their plight, their challenges. And that's what you hear. Make sense?
Yes, I was going to say that the first advocate I remember is Guy Kawasaki. He worked for Apple. And absolutely. I'm not sure about anybody before him. I don't know if he created the role of advocate, but he's certainly the first one I remember. Somebody that would be on stage, that would be at shows, and they'd be talking to customers, basically acting as the voice of the customer back for the product teams. Yeah. And that is certainly one of the roles that I have as well. It's interesting, as you mentioned, talking to customers. The interactions come from all sorts of places these days. 15 years ago, you really had to be on the road to do that a little bit more. It's a little bit easier to interface with people these days virtually in order to get, and plus we can collect feedback through a variety of forums online or interacting with customers. And let's just say our MVPs, our THWAC MVPs. THWAC is our online community. So we have this constant feedback loop. And I'm one of the people that kind of is inserted into the middle of it in order to collect the information, what's working for you, what's not working for you, where are we falling short, where are we falling behind, what can we do to make your life better, easier at this moment. And so that's one of the functions that an advocate would play.
Absolutely. And what was interesting, you said something there that I think gets overlooked. Right? Because a lot of people, and even from what I said, a lot of people could take it that way, that the advocates almost are replacing salespeople, that the advocates are outbound, right, advocating for, in this case, SolarWinds with potential customers and existing customers. But there's another vital role you play, which is the feedback loop, right? You're the first line of contact with people really using this software or the service. And they're giving you valuable feedback on what they like, dislike, what works, what doesn't work. And you're bringing it back to the team, right? And
yes.
You, in many ways, the canary, right? Telling them, hey, this is what we're hearing. This is what people are telling me. This is what we got to do better. This is what's working. This is what's not working.
I think when it comes to advocacy, what you'll find is most advocates also were practitioners at one point. In my case, I was a production database administrator for 7 years for a financial services company. So I have, let's just say, I won't call them scars. I have wounds. And I have a lot of wounds. And it's the thing is that I've been there. I've been at the desk with the phone ringing, somebody saying, how much longer before the thing is fixed? And you're like, I didn't know anything was broken. And I've been in that pressure cooker environment. And so it makes it a little easier to have that conversation with somebody, because when they say you're falling down short, you can walk through and say, so explain to me what you're doing during the day. And then you can say, so I've tried these things. Have you tried those things? And then, hey, what if our software did this for you? Because if it did this for you, wouldn't that be easier or not? So having the experience, in the battle, so to speak, having that experience, that practical work experience, I think lends itself to have better conversations so you can be a better advocate for those customers and working with the product team to, at the end of the day, we want happy customers, right? Isn't that what everybody wants?
That's what they say. I just report the news. I don't make it. But yes, that is. We all want happy customers. We all want to deliver delight. That's something we hear a lot, right? We deliver delight to our customers. And it's important. Anyway, though, we seem to have gone, down the rabbit hole there a little bit, Thomas. Let's bring it on back to what you wanted to talk about today and share with our audience. Why don't you do a little sharing?
Absolutely. So primarily, our audience might know SolarWinds for being a leader in network performance monitoring software, and we still are. But we have a new offering. It's called the SolarWinds Hybrid Cloud Observability Platform. So what we've learned over the years is that the way systems are built and architected today is much different than 15 years ago. So 15 years ago, basically, applications were built and deployed to the server that was in the closet behind you. Everybody connecting to it was on the same LAN or maybe WAN. And so that was kind of the single node architecture, very local to you. Maybe another office and somewhere else in the country might connect, but that was about it. You were still kind of, your own little universe, so to speak. Well, today things are built, and the phrase they use is cloud native. And to me, cloud native means you're going to build something that is globally distributed, that can scale up and down on demand as necessary. And that's a different type of architecture. And back in the day, I'm going to say it was Google who first came up with the idea of this position called the site reliability engineer. And to me, that's the modern day version of a sysadmin, a DBA, a network admin. So these site reliability engineers, well, they're the ones that are tasked with making sure that these new architectures and systems are up and running. And of course, Google is cutting edge. So they came up with the idea of these 4 golden signals, right? Your concurrency, errors, latency, and throughput. And those 4 golden signals are where you started your troubleshooting. This is a huge shift. You're talking to a DBA who'd be looking at a much different set of metrics in order to diagnose a problem. My first metrics are not concurrency or errors or things of that. But when you have globally distributed architecture, you need a different mindset. And that gives rise to application performance monitoring, which gives rise to this idea of observability. And observability is this idea of control theory where you infer the health of a system just based upon its outputs. Well, SolarWinds has a core Orion platform. Your listeners might, viewers might know, but we actually also have 57 products. So the idea is when we looked at what we had, we realized that we had all the makings to solve the problems of modern architecture. We have an observability platform to offer. It just requires a cross-section for multiple products. So that's what we've done. You could say it's sort of a bundle, a magic bundling, but it's also kind of a rewrite where we're offering up, that ability to have an observability platform, an observability dashboard that helps you with these modern architectures. So our customers, as they've gone through their journey and evolution, as they strip themselves of these legacy systems and they take on these modern systems, we've updated our tooling and our platform in order to meet the needs of those customers. Again, we want happy customers. So that's what we've launched. We've launched this observability platform. It's subscription-based, which is also the new thing on the block as opposed to traditional software licensing. And it helps solve the problems that people are facing today.
Excellent. So, look, observability, if I had to pick an overhyped word for 2021, it would be observability. Everybody is talking observability. It's interesting. I had another interview, I think it was yesterday or the day before, and it was a company that we don't really think of in APM or security or that kind of thing. But they announced their observability. But their observability was about observing network performance, right? And it really kind of opened my eyes. Is that there's so many facets to observability. I tended to think of it strictly in that APM. Right, application performance managing. Almost, look, I'm an old security guy. To me, observability is the new SIM, right?
Yeah.
I'm gathering inputs from every input I can gather and trying to mix a actionable intelligence cocktail from it to understand what the hell is going on.
I agree.
It's such a big thing, though, right? I'm sorry, go ahead.
It is. I was going to say that if you were to apply the principles of observability to that observability word itself, what comes back is many marketing messages. Every company gets to decide what observability means for their customers, because every customer has a different scenario. There is not one shop that is exactly like another, that whatever platform you give them is going to be able to do exactly the same thing to meet their needs. Even companies in the same industry have different requirements for, or different metrics to hit. So you have to have something that's a little more extensible. You can't just say, or you can just say, here, we're letting you observe network performance. So now we're observability. Technically that tracks. Sure, you fit the definition, I guess. But what you really need is you need a system that it gives you a little bit of old world and new world. So the old world was about visibility. So a company like SolarWinds was great at letting you know all of the nodes, switches, routers, everything that was an endpoint in your environment. We could find and collect metrics and give that back to you in the dashboard. That gave you visibility. Then we built in things like what we call a perf stack, which let you graph the metrics in layers. So you could see disk, and you could see network, and you could see database weights all in one graph and say, all right, so where truly in this application stack, where really was the issue? And now you have to have a system that can combine all of those things together, give you that full stack observability. That's what SolarWinds brings to the table. A lot of companies can do, like you said, the SIEM. Those tools are great at ingesting logs, but maybe not so great at giving you actionable insights. What am I supposed to do next with this information? That's where SolarWinds, we kind of cut through all that. We want to get you that signal through all that noise, and we want to do it in an affordable way, again, to make your life easier today.
I love it. Makes perfect sense to me as well. So, Tom, is this offering available now? You're just announcing it. It's in beta. It's coming. What's the status here?
It is available now. You can order, download, contact us. You can get it today. Yes.
Where do you get it?
Yeah. Oh, SolarWinds.com.
Really? Okay.
If you're an existing customer, we'll work with you to upgrade to the new platform. If you're not an existing customer, you can go to SolarWinds.com and look to the procs page for the hybrid cloud observability platform in order to get started.
But I just want to be clear. So Orion is like kind of the main platform for SolarWinds, right? This is runs on the Orion platform, or
it's separate and apart.
Yeah. So Orion is the platform.
Orion, excuse me.
That's fine. No, it's the platform that serves as the base for what we'll say 8 or 10. We'll call them core products. We have a lot of other products that integrate and feed in as well. But Orion is the platform where, the perf stack and app stack and all these other views and dashboards live. So the hybrid cloud observability, you should think of it as something like an Orion platform as well.
Excellent. Hey, Thomas, we're about out of time. I want to thank you for coming on and giving us the scoop here on this new offering from SolarWinds. Keep up the great work as head geek over there. And we'll hope to see you back here soon. Okay, man?
Yes, sir. Love to come back. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Thomas LaRock, head geek over at SolarWinds here on Techstrong TV. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more. ContainerJournal.com is operated by MediaOps Inc., the team behind DevOps.com, Digital Anarchist, SecurityBoulevard.com, DevOps Connect, and DevOpsDozen.com.
All right, we're back. Next up, we've got DevOps Unbound, which is one of our regular series here on Techstrong TV. This one is titled Hyperscale DevOps. Well, how do you get there? How indeed. Mitch Ashley, who is the host, is joined in this episode by Tracy Reagan from Deploy Hub, Parag Doshi from Tricentis, and Larry Macaroni from Contrast Security, and they discuss DevOps at hyperscale, enterprise scale versus startup scale, how to set up a hyperscale environment, and how to test at hyperscale. Pretty much all facets there of the DevOps tool chain is going to be included in that conversation. So totally one worth checking out. So let's go ahead and roll it now.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of DevOps Unbound. We've got great panelists, as we always do, and frankly, great friends. These are some great colleagues that we've all known each other either for 5 minutes or for 5 years, but we become friends very quickly because we share experiences and knowledge and things like that. So before I get to our topic, my name is Mitch Ashley. I'm CTO with Techstrong Group, who puts on these video shows, and with our production team. And our production team is actually both a combination of Techstrong Group and our sponsor, Tricentis. We say we have great thanks, and we really love the collaboration that we have with our team and our partners at Tricentis. Great company to work with, and we appreciate one of our panelists here today is also from Tricentis. So with that, our topic is about hyperscaling DevOps, and we're going to get into what that means and kind of maybe where we're going next and how do we do that based on what we've learned. So let me first start with Parag. Would you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about Tricentis. I didn't say much about what you do other than working with us. And of course, tell us about yourself too.
Sure, Mitch. Hey, thank you guys. Happy to be here again. Happy to speak to everyone. My background, I am the VP of Engineering at Tricentis, an absolutely outstanding company that tries to make DevOps real so that you have the assurance you need when you deploy your applications at the speed of your imagination. So I run engineering. We provide software testing products here at Tricentis. And I've been both a developer, tester, a builder, actually building large-scale complex systems and organizations of hundreds of people to actually do that, whether software products or digital transformation for large companies as well as small ones.
Fantastic. Living the dream, it sounds like, Parag, so to say.
Indeed.
Tracy, good friend, and I don't know if it's okay to call you a regular, but you're pretty close if you're not already. Good to have you on the show again today. Introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about Deploy Hub.
Thank you. I am the CEO and co-founder of Deploy Hub. We kind of fit into this topic quite well in terms of kind of hyperscaling the DevOps process. Deploy Hub governs the supply chain of your software, in particular around microservices, so that you can deliver secure, high-quality microservices at scale. And that is really the discussion for today, is how do we do this stuff at scale?
Fantastic. And last but not least is Larry. Larry, please introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about you and a little bit of your background, your company as well.
Yeah, sure. The most relevant experience for this conversation is that I led the DevSecOps transformation program at Comcast, 600 development teams over the course of 5 years. We essentially replaced the traditional AppSec program with this developer first approach. And we hit a wall at some point where we couldn't do DevSecOps without doing DevOps. And so we actually had to morph after about 100 teams to being a DevOps transformation program so we could build on that. So I have a lot of experience essentially doing that. I'm now at Contrast Security, basically doing the same thing, except helping clients of Contrast Security adopt DevOps and DevSecOps.
Fantastic. And I was part of that industry and observed that transformation. It's pretty phenomenal to observe and what was accomplished at Comcast. So our topic is hyperscaling DevOps. And part of our kind of prep for our panel we were talking about is hyperscaling about like taking it to the next level, or is there some kind of future state of DevOps, or is it scaling it more horizontally? And I know from my own experience, whether it's creating a product or running organizations, doing something on a team or two is fantastic because you can really focus and kind of get things going, figure out how to do it and get it working. Doing that across a large organization or a large number of teams, getting that adoption, it's not just buy-in, but adoption, really using it where you're really running kind of on all cylinders, as they say, is no small feat. That's a huge task and a great admiration for folks that are able to do that. Is hyperscaling DevOps one, the other, both, or is something else that I'm not describing? Maybe Larry, if you would kind of start a conversation here.
Yeah, sure. So I tend to think when I think of at scale, I think of across an entire organization. So 600 development teams in the case, 10,000 developers in the case of Comcast. The trouble there is that not every development team, in fact, no two development teams are the same. And they all start with a different level of maturity. But my last few months at Comcast, I was working with a team that I asked them, well, where's the code? Where's the source code repository? Where, can I take a look? And they're like, oh, well, that's not up to date. I'm like, what do you mean that's not up to date? Well, we only put it in there when we have to. Well, how do you work together as a 5-person team? Oh, we have a shared drive. So
Larry's laughing.
I was working with teams like that. In the last month I was there, that's 30 years after source code repositories were popular, to teams that were on the leading edge of trunk-based development and feature toggles and traffic shaping, high-end, sort of like the cream of the crop kind of DevOps practices.
Interesting. Jump in, team.
So I'll jump in here. First, I'll sort of speak to what Larry mentioned, because I see that, and I'll tell you from a background of working in very large $100 billion types of enterprises to smaller companies, startups, scale-ups, right? I think what Larry said is absolutely true. I've seen companies that say, okay, pound their fist and say, all the source code needs to be here, and then consolidate. Okay, is it back in the days of ClearCase, or is it back GitHub, Git this, GitLab, whatever, right? And every team is doing things differently. I think there's a maturity of that governance that the corporation needs to follow. So to me, it's not like hyperscaling DevOps is like the destination. Let's get all 10,000 development teams for a $100 billion company to do the same thing the same way. That's very, very hard to do, especially if you're trying to grow your company from a startup to a scale up to a large public company. You have to go with the journey where your organization can mature along the way. So I've had to even take back some of my, I'll call it bigoted thoughts, like everybody should be able to see all the source code. It should be in the same place. We should have inventories that things can be renewed automatically and so forth. I'd know when things would expire. When do we need to patch things? When's my third-party licensing going to expire? It's not practical to expect that all on day one. So I'd say that organizational change, having the ability to grow with your company and expect a level of maturity along the way. I came at it sort of opposite from Larry, more of a DevOps first mindset, and we'd have pockets of excellence, pockets of teams that we'd say, okay, we allow them to deploy every week, every day, while other teams, they can't deploy but a couple times a year, right? And things in between. And so how do you enable all of these different teams with all these different maturities along with your company's maturity? That requires, perhaps in our case, we had to do DevOps first. And then we said, okay, wait, now we're scanning our containers and now I need to do DevSecOps and I need to have dynamic scans, not just static scans. So you just mature along the way and try to accommodate as many teams as you can. That's what I've seen in our transformations.
Yeah, so I exactly the way I think. It's take every team wherever they are now and get them on the path to improvement in this gradual improvement ramp, and coach them along that path with self-service tools. So you have to do a lot of toolsmithing to make it easy. And I think Tracy's going to want to chime in here with this because having a nice sort of offering of templates and sort of canned capability that makes it easy for them to adopt a practice. So toolsmithing is key. And then coaching is the other thing that's key. You're not an auditor, you're not a gatekeeper. You need a person that's there to help them. Assuming they want to do their best and to help them get the best out of it. Tracy, I'm curious about your toolsmithing.
You've been called, Tracy. You have to respond.
I know. So there's a lot to unpack in that question. Let's just put it that way. Yeah. But I think we should see it as, let's just think about it as an XY graph. On the X line, we have compliance. I don't really like to think of this in terms of tools, even though tools are an important part of it. But if we think about the X line as compliance, what are we trying to achieve in our DevOps process? Because if you identify it in terms of tools, every team may need some other kind of tool. So then it makes it more difficult to create this graph. So the X line is the compliance level. The Y line is the adoption. So we need to, if we're going to hyperscale our DevOps processes, we need to really have a complete X line where we have every compliance level that we want. And in terms of the adoption, we want it to be a pretty flat line across the top. We don't want it to be peaks and valleys, meaning some teams may be doing a really great job of security, and other teams may not be doing any of it. And other teams might be doing a great job of automating their releases, and other teams may not be doing a good job. So we need to be able to see our compliance levels and understand them and communicate them, and then begin tracking that Y line to understand the level of adoption and compliance across the teams. Now, that's just from an enterprise perspective and building out kind of what I like to call a compliance scorecard, and they're beginning to track who's adopting those compliance levels. And as there's so much to talk about in terms of hyperscaling DevOps in particular and microservices, but if we just think about monolithic, there is ideas about or suggestions about templating and being able to quickly stand up a team that has all of the tools that they want to choose and use that's appropriate for them, that meets that compliance level. The better we can get at doing that, the faster we will scale.
Interesting. It's a very kind of nice way to organize, compartmentalize, like what are you trying to accomplish it? How do you measure it? And then on top of that, I think something you said, Larry, is you do have to meet people where they are, right? Not everyone is skilled in the same ways or operates the same way. They need some level of flexibility and autonomy, not rigid compliance from that perspective. And they're going to respect and adopt it more easily, I think, if you're adopting of them.
Yeah, Mitch.
How can you flatten that y-axis? That's the trick.
Mitch, do you mind if I share a diagram that's it's not the exact same thing that Tracy has because it's circular instead of X and Y, but it's got a lot of what I think she's talking about.
Go for it. Yeah, I'm curious to see what you're talking about.
So this was the way we visualized maturity of different business units inside of Comcast. And we could render the graph for all 600 teams, but you couldn't drill down to individual teams with this. But this is a business unit that had 10 different development teams. And so we have this maturity concept of this darker shade of green is you've adopted it to the level of culture, meaning you're getting full value out of it and you're doing it for every opportunity that you could be doing it for. And so these are the list of practices around the outside here. That's your compliance dimension. Compliance levels dimension. And this is only 11 of the 40 practices in the overall framework, but they were the key 11 that we were focused on this year. We call them the essential 11 for that year. And we could meet with an individual business unit leader and say, okay, well, you're doing great on secrets management, but you guys aren't doing so hot on threat modeling. You're doing okay on threat modeling, but you're doing worse on these sort of adoption of scanning tools in your pipeline. And you've barely gotten started on this team peer review concept here for your teams. So security team peer review. So this is the way you look at it, moment in time. And if you click on each one of these, you can drill down to the individual team. And then this is the trend over time. So you can see the teams maturing over time in there. And we gamified the whole thing. So the whole thing had a scorecard that each business unit would get a reward if they had the most improvement in the 90 days. We had silly games like one business unit leader challenged another business unit leader to improve the most. And the loser had to wear a bunny outfit, bunny costume during Easter week or the week before Easter. So, it really made it fun and made the whole thing essentially gradual and gamified with visualizations like what Tracy was describing.
Okay, now Parag, we've had the XY, we've had the circle graph. Yeah, your job is to put it into a pie chart for us.
Coordinate today,
or a data scatter plot, whatever your choice. I'm curious your perspective. You're running an engineering team, obviously, sizable one.
One thing I'd say with what Larry and Tracy said is, I sort of like Tracy's sort of generic view, right? And then Larry had a very good, I don't know if you want to call it a radar chart of maturity, right? And when I'm dealing with triage situations, actually developing code that meets, delights, not just meets our customer expectations, but delights our customers. And it's a SaaS. I've got to keep it running and I've got to keep it secure. I think I probably need like 10 different radar charts, right? So there's so many facets. There's security, which is you peel that onion and we all know the defense in depth. And okay, it's not just access, it's data, it's everything. There's security. How quickly do you respond to security? How do you work with your customers? In our case, we're an ISP. So we also try to create a bridge between our CISOs sometimes and say, can we get some private channel communication access? Because we can never predict when things happen. Everybody might remember the whole Log4j fund we had end of last year, right? So we like to do that. But then now when I think beyond security, then also it's operations, what's availability, disaster recovery, how well are you able to do your tabletop exercises and things like that. And no matter how much we prepare and how much money we invest, it's always those outages that we never thought of, the unknown that still gets us. So I see so many different facets. I didn't even talk about dev velocity. right?
But at scale, Parag, I think what you have to do is you have to basically stop as a leader of a big organization trying to sort of look at each of those things for an individual app or individual team, unless you're a one app company, and what you can do instead is you have to say, package those things, those concepts up. For instance, monitoring. Absolutely. And as a practice that teams can adopt at various different levels, thoughts, words, actions, culture. And you define those levels and then they, you encourage them to sort of each individually adopt them. So at scale, it's less about you being aware of all those metrics yourself and more about making sure the team themselves is aware of it and they're working towards getting better at responding or improving that metric.
Absolutely agree, Larry, because there's no way you could say, okay, let's put up that radar chart and then say, that's how I'm measuring you. You actually want to ingrain that knowledge as people are actually doing their development. They're thinking security while they're building so that we prevent having those kinds of issues. Scan left shift. We always talk about left shift with DevOps, right? Left shift so that you can prevent creation of critical CVEs before they even get out of the development phase, out of the developer's laptop, if that's where they're developing right there, so that what looks like you're going to have in production is actually running on your laptop. And so I think that's part of it. I think as from my vantage point, I have security folks that say, okay, Parag, get your engineers to do better and better with security, and we provide the training. And then I have operations folks that ask, okay, we need to have better availability. We need to have early warning. We need to have alerts. And then I have development teams and QA teams that say, okay, we need to do regression tests, add this to the regression test. So there's so many different things that are coming together. And a lot of times what I have to do is I have to know the maturity of my teams and say, okay, what is the theme of this quarter that I'm going to really make an improvement?
What's the focus practices this quarter? And get the whole org to sort of rally around that, improve that.
And that it begins to be a part of the conversation that we seldom ever have. And that's taking a really good look at ourselves from how we got here. Right. And understand that when we first started doing DevOps, pipeline, lifecycle management, upper management had some investment in it. They saw it as something that they had to, that needed to be done. But to be quite honest, most of the tooling that the developers brought in, how many people really did a POC around Jenkins? It was just brought in by developers and they started pulling this stuff together. We have never really taken this as serious as we should. And to be honest, the security puzzle, we have failed as a global community. We have really failed on understanding the importance of security. Even today, I walk into organizations and I look at build scripts that are still using star.star. I hate that because I know that means that can suck anything up from the directory that it wants to and put it in a package. SBOMs, we've had those for quite some time. Do we use them? We might generate them, but do we do anything with them or look at them? Even CVEs, yeah, we might look at it once in a while. So we have to.
I think if you're doing DevOps, you're not looking at it once in a while. You're not looking at it at all. You're essentially putting a tool. No, you're putting a tool in the.
That's your point.
That is my point.
You shouldn't be looking at it. My point is you shouldn't be looking at it. You should put a tool in the pipeline that automatically checks it for you.
Yes,
so,
I understand that.
Go, Tracy.
Okay.
I understand that, Larry. My point is that we haven't had upper management really focus on this area, provide the proper funding and the staff to be able to automate all of these pieces. And we're still doing a lot manually. We still have a lot of plug-in scripts that we're doing. We don't have the kind of tooling that you're talking about, Larry. Deploy Hub is trying to solve that problem too, have a central place for all that DevOps intelligence so you can find it. But from our history, if we look at how we've done this in the past, it's been through a lot of one-off scripts. It's been a lot of duct tape and a lot of open source. So upper management has to start understanding that there needs to be substantial investment in the DevOps practice to automate, to bring in better tooling, to bring in tools that can do broader metrics so that we can solve this problem and go as fast as we need to.
The way to hook upper management, you can usually get them to agree to an experiment with 10 teams. And then the way to hook upper management to sort of scale every year, which is the way I did it at Comcast, from 10 teams the first 6 months to 50 teams the first year and a half, et cetera, all the way to 600 teams, is you gather the metrics of the results. And so we had 1/4 the cost. We were doing security at 1/4 the cost of the traditional AppSec program when you consider the number of developers we were serving. And we had 6x fewer vulnerabilities in production, 1/6 as many vulnerabilities in production for teams after they went through our program. You show those numbers to executives and they go, why don't we get rid of our old AppSec program, which is eventually what Comcast decided to do.
Both of you are right, Larry and Tracy. See, like what Larry, you're giving us is little cookbooks that say, hey, look, show this, get your executive buy-in. I think I said this on one of the DevOps Unbound. I think sponsorship is an extremely thing to understand. There's too many facets. We're talking, we always say people, process, technology. We're talking about all three simultaneously. And if we say, look, I'm going to get you this many CVEs out, I'm going to left shift all these tools and all, there's some sheer inertia that we have in our industry that allows sponsorship to sustain it over a decade, or at least even over 1 or 2 years. Every company I've been at, it's taking 3 to 6 months to just build out the technology platform. Forget the whole cultural shift. And do they really want the transformation? When I've worked for $100 billion companies, after some of the largest hacks they've ever been through, okay, they said, Parag, come in and let's go transform this large company. Okay, the sponsorship can last maybe 6 months to a year, but usually things are underestimated just because it takes so long to put together. Okay, I got Jenkins, Circle CI, Bamboo. I've got one of everything problem in the DevOps space. Mm-hmm. So starting with rationalizing. Then what does left shift even mean? Okay, and how much funding do I really need? Okay, to get on all these aspects, because cloud and DevOps, it's all about that automation, right? One click, self-service, immediate gratification of all facets: security, operations, development velocity, defect leakage rate, release on demand with confidence. That's where we try to provide some value in the market. I'm just saying it's too big. And unless you have the sponsorship really wanting that transformation, then it's really hard to get buy-in. I think you get buy-in in stages. And
yeah, I think the way you stage it, though, is not one tool at a time or one set of practices at a time. It's one small set of teams at a time. So there's always a few teams that are more ready than others to get started. And so if you start with those teams and you measure the results and you turn what they're doing into a pattern, a recipe that you can share with other teams, then the whole thing sort of snowballs. And
not only that, Larry, you're absolutely right. You market it; it becomes your early win, right. Small enough, and then you get, instead of forcing people, which I've rarely seen work, people are like, "I want to be like that team." They're able to release every day.
Developers want to be the cool kid, right? They want the one that he has the best tools and is using the best tech, and yeah.
So I'll just say, be patient on that journey. Depending on the size of your enterprise, you have to be patient. And when you're small, I thought that could be more nimble as well. Well, then, you don't have the resources you do when you're in a large enterprise, right? And the skills may not have kept up to date as much as when you're in large enterprise, you can pull resources from other departments. So
there's an interesting dichotomy here, I think, which is kind of what got us here, is sort of the bottoms up. Tracy mentioned, who approved Jenkins coming in. Nobody did. Somebody decided to do it and we adopted it, right? And somebody went to their manager and said, you need to buy this thing because we're already using it everywhere. But on the other hand, kind of to use the hyperscale term again, you have to take a systemic look at the whole system and how do you help adoption, whether it's sponsorship, whether it's things that help with individual teams and adoption. And you don't want to kind of kill the goose that laid the golden egg, which is that innovation and entrepreneurial spirit or whatever that helps people bring new things in and try new ideas. but you also, there's a phrase that goes after every edict, which is "this too shall pass," right? There'll be another edict that follows that. Those don't work very well either. But I'm curious, Tracy, you're tackling, with Deploy Hub, a particularly meaty problem, which is, the little Pokemons we call containers and microservices and things like that can go everywhere, and suddenly you don't know what you're doing and can't manage it. That's kind of the same problem we have with organizations, and how we start to bring some structure and organization to it.
Yeah, so if we think about the way we have managed these monolithic projects, and what Prague and Larry said are completely right. When you are rolling out a DevOps process, you start with a group of teams, and then you can roll that process out across the organization over time. But we are in the middle of a shift, and that shift is pretty disruptive. And that shift makes us less of individual teams and more of a larger collaborative organization, where if we're doing microservices and cloud native at scale, it means that we are going to decompose parts and we're going to be reusing parts. So not everybody has to write a login routine, for example. You might have a security group that writes the login routine and everybody uses it, which means that we start becoming more of a central group as opposed to siloed teams. So we have to start understanding how we can better manage these pipelines, how we can work harder to be more collaborative and the GitHub folks have been telling us to be more collaborative for years and years and years. They've said, open up your repository so everybody can see the code. And yes, those bigoted ideas we might have to let go of, but there is some truth to it. There's absolutely some truth to it. And if we're going to do cloud native at scale, we have to think in a different way. I think what's happening at the CD Foundation around CD events and having an event process where you don't necessarily have to, you could have that x-axis that have all the compliance levels, and your CD process has a payload that's going to be initiated through an event listener, regardless of what tool that you have underneath under the covers that your team decides to use because it's best for your platform. And how do we start really understanding the whole supply chain and how the supply chain is impacted? What's the risk level of a particular microservice? So in other words, as I often say, our DORA metrics might be getting a little long in the tooth, and we might need to expand them in a decomposed, truly service-oriented, I should say microservice-oriented architecture, because it's going to change. One microservice could cause the 5 or 6 different application teams to need to retest before it goes out because it has a high risk value. So there's just different ways we need to start understanding the pipeline, and that and shifting and being disrupted is sometimes okay. And it should take us to a place where we can go faster, regardless of what teams are actually implementing it. And if they do want to implement it, they have a listener that will solve that problem. And, I'm betting on the catalogs, pulling that data into a central catalog. So, this microservice is being deployed by Helm. This particular Salesforce object is just got a script behind it. These are the key value pairs. These are the CVEs for this microservice. And how does that roll up to an application level? So we have a lot to think about in solving these problems. And that's what we've been working on at the open source project Ortelius and the CD Foundation with their events. We're looking at how we have to disrupt that pipeline and make it where we can scale easily.
Yeah, it's good to see people are collaborating outside the organization too, Tracy, to work on these problems, because it's bigger than any one organization is going to solve on their own.
Yes, absolutely. It's a community discussion we have to have. And I really believe that the security discussion, the DevSecOps discussion is starting to trickle up all the way. I think upper management has heard it loud and clear. And I believe that will help fund some of these better tooling, improvement in how the pipeline actually functions, how much more secure the pipeline is, how well does it run? If it's just got those one-off scripts, they break pretty easy. And that pipeline becomes a more critical factor. It's almost like upper management's finally realizing that they're making products and they have an assembly line. If that assembly line breaks down every day or is hard for every team to jump on, and they all each want to make a full shoe all at the same time, like a cobbler, that they have a problem.
Never let a good crisis go to waste, right? So
exactly.
When you have something like Cloud for Shell or Spring for Shell, hit, that's a great time to have a conversation with executives about more funding. So,
in fact, to back that up, I think I'm glad you made that connection, because the dichotomy that we're talking about here is all this new technology knowledge, building out a platform, shared services, or a shared catalog. I call it service catalog. Pulling all that together is a centralization effect that we're saying, okay, we've got maybe 10 out of 100 teams that are really stellar in all the things Larry mentioned about, and let's do some internal PR for that. So we're pushing, all three of us are pushing for that centralization so we can expand that greatness across an enterprise. But then I've also seen that if you centralize too fast, you can actually slow things down.
Well, and not just too fast, but too much. I mean, every team has a different context. They're targeting maybe even a completely different market. And they certainly have different skilled people on their team. And so you have to sort of have something, a catalog. I like your use of the phrase catalog. You pull it together into a catalog, and it can't be a smorgasbord with a million different options, because that's impossible to manage and you'll never scale that way. But there has to be at least some flexibility in there to accommodate the various levels of
organization needs to publish. This is the reusable artifact. This is where you go to get stuff from other teams, right? So there's some notion of catalog, whether it's at the service level or even data catalogs and product catalogs, right? So we have this notion of centralizing. And I think the second point I was saying, to follow up what Tracy said is, and you also said, Larry, never let a crisis go to waste. I believe security is forcing us to mature, right? So whereas before we were trying to get the sponsorship and say, we should do this because it's the right thing to do. Okay, now it's, you must do this, and you can either catch it while the product is being built, software product is being built, or software service is being built, or you could catch it too late and use your customers as your testers to say, hey, I found that critical CVE. And so this is why I think the maturity that we're all driving, because security wasn't put into DevOps terminology, now we forced it in there. It's forcing us all to mature and say, see those 10 teams out of 100? We all need to be like them, because otherwise,
the chief software architect at Comcast wanted a more central funded sponsored DevOps transformation program. He couldn't pull it off until we had enough of these security crises. And I was then starting to say, we can't do true shift left security, true DevSecOps, until we have true DevOps. And we only have that for about 100 of the 600 teams. We need a program to mature the remaining 500 up to a level where they can do that. And so I went in to the president with him. I helped him over the weekend draft this multi-million-dollar proposal, and then I met with him with the president on Monday, and we presented where he got the funding to actually do the DevOps transformation program.
Which is key to your success, is that upper management buy-in. Absolutely. You couldn't have done it without it. And not every organization has gotten there. And I think the security question and the security threats, the real security threats that we're facing, is what's going to drive that discussion at the upper level and bring the Larrys in on a weekend brainstorming to get the job done.
With that, I think we're going to let you have the last word, Tracy. It's been a fascinating conversation, and all three of you, I think there's just the fertile ground of great ideas and experiences here. about scaling DevOps, because it's no easy challenge, and we're living it. All of you are living that process too. So, I want to thank all three of our panelists, Parag, Tracy, and Larry. Also, want to mention too. Speaking of interesting conversations, we have coming up on May 24th. Tricentis is doing their virtual summit, and we're actually hosting a DevOps Unbound segment that will be part of the conference. And we're talking about creating positive digital experiences. So we can imagine how this fits into that kind of a conversation. So through testing. So I hope you'll join the Tricentis team and join us as part of that conversation there on May 24th. You can go to virtualsummit.tricentis.com. So nice to have a tie-in there for you, Parag, with Tricentis.
And I'll add one thing. All three of us talked about, right? Unless you have the confidence to move that quickly, I believe that none of our visions will come true, right? So that's where we come in and say, okay, let's give our users confidence.
Agreed. Well, thank you, Parag. Thank you very much, Tracy. Thank you, Larry, so much, all of you, for sharing your experiences. I want to do a shout out to my co-host, Alan Schimmel, who's not able to join us today. And also a big shout out to our production team, Lanier and Jody, and the folks that do all of our video work. We appreciate what you do as well, too. So thank you to you, our audience. We appreciate you spending this time with us. We look forward to next time we see you on DevOps Unbound. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alan.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
With the COVID-19 pandemic, it is important to protect yourself and others from spreading the virus. Prevention and personal safety is key. Here are the top ways you can protect yourself and others. Wash your hands often with soap and water for at least 20 seconds. Avoid touching your face. Practice social distancing and avoid high-risk potential people. If you are showing symptoms, stay at home. If you must go out, wear a face mask. Always cover coughs and sneezes with a tissue, or use the inside of your elbow. Clean and sanitize frequently touched surfaces daily. Together, we can prevent this pandemic.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this presentation about what happens after you shift security left. I'm James Chiappetta, and I'll be presenting today. So who am I? I started off a long while ago, it feels like, as a software security pen tester and engineer. I guess now have elevated myself to be a subject matter expert in application and cloud security. I guess that's what 10,000 hours does. I've built several different security teams across different organizations throughout my career, various sizes, various size teams, various size orgs, focused on creating really a scalable program through lightweight design practices, threat modeling, automation, partnership, and security assurance mechanisms like pen testing. I have a blog, you feel free to check it out, called betterappsec.com, where I publish all my thoughts and philosophy, wisdom, what have you. Yeah, so first things first, I think most folks have heard that the term of shifting security left, and it's pretty clear, right? It lowers development costs, it reduces risks. And in practice, right, there are various outcomes beyond that. But it's typically nuanced. But today I'd like to try to generalize some of that. So today we're going to look at 5 outcomes, at least that I've seen in my experience, from shifting security left. So here are the 5 at a really, really high level. The first one is cultural influence. The second is strong engineering partnerships. The third is automated vulnerability discovery. And the fourth is continuous cybersecurity program improvement. And the last is security engineering innovation. So let's get right to it. Yeah. So first one, cultural influence. What the heck does that mean? Well, that if you go back to a few slides ago about why shifting security left is important, the idea is to lower costs and reduce risk. But in order to do that, right, you kind of need to have an organization being in a position to do that holistically, right? So if you think about a security program really quickly, what's their objective, right? Find vulnerabilities, overgeneralizing here, but like finding vulnerabilities, right, and getting them patched and implementing controls to mitigate risk. So we really want to move that, and that's what this picture depicts here, over to the left, right? And what that does is get security at the top of the mind for folks in an organization. So I think the big thing here, right, is it starts to drive, starting from the top, right? You get cultural influence, you get that buy-in, and cybersecurity becomes a principle or a tenet of how the organization operates. And a key way to do that, right, is through threat modeling. I'm going to talk a lot about that. And what that really means is accounting for the unhappy path. So part 2 of cultural influence. So threat modeling, right? I do it frequently in the organization I'm at today, and I've done it throughout my entire career. And I think there's like really 2 fundamental ways to help people to start to think about that, right? And it's these 2 really common attack paths, right? Attackers coming from the outside in, and then attackers coming from the inside out, right? So if you can kind of anchor folks to those 2 things, you could really start to break down some barriers in teaching people how to think about attack paths and threat scenarios, et cetera, which sounds really daunting, but it becomes quite pragmatic and practical in practice. So taking that a step further, right? I know this is an overloaded slide. I understand that, but I really wanted to illustrate like what in a threat modeling scenario, what the inside out and the outside in practice really looks like. So at the top, that's the outside in, and at the bottom, that's like the inside out, right? So yeah, understanding threat modeling, right? If you're doing that, you're understanding your attack surface, you're understanding your software systems, your APIs. You're really kind of highlighting where the various pieces of your infrastructure sit and your software sit, how they communicate with one another, expected flow over them. And those are in threat modeling speak called trust boundaries. But really the thing here is you want to break down this barrier of getting people to think this way and provide structure and format so people could take away actions. Like what are they going to go do, right? And those actions are security requirements. And I come up with a formula down here where you take your assets plus your threats and your mitigations, and that equals your requirement. So like, what are your assets? What threats in those threat scenarios you're accounting for, plus the controls you want to put in place, start to drive a vernacular around how we want to control risk in an environment. So that's that. Let me just pop back real quick. There's one quick thing I really wanted to say about this, right? It's a collaborative thing, and you really don't want to, if you're doing this right in practice, or in my mind, if you're doing it right, you're not focusing on the doom and gloom. You're really thinking about it practically and doing it together, and really saying like, well, we have to plan for accidents. Accidents happen, right? Like that's why when you get in a car, right, there's all sorts of safety mechanisms for you. All right. So transitioning over to outcome 2, strong engineering partnerships. You can't really, at least in my experience, get to that threat modeling piece. Sure, you could do it in a vacuum, but the outcomes aren't as good when you're not working with the product and the engineering teams to get the context, the business context, right? So, focusing in on the picture real quick, there are effectively 3 generalized areas of application security here that I'm illustrating. And the one on the left is the one we're in focus here. So the outcome of you get partnerships, right? So approaching people saying, hey, I want you to, have security accounted for before you build And that happens in the first phase of the development lifecycle. And that's what the bottom half of this picture is, this overlay of like where partnerships fit in, right? You do your threat model and requirements come out. Maybe you create some tickets on people's backlogs and they go to implement, and it's like, oh, all of a sudden they're coming back to you. Hey, I need to ask a question about, this library over this library. Which one would you prefer? And you start forming a partnership, right? A dialogue, an open dialogue that continues to evolve and hopefully get better over time. So yeah, that's really, what I'd like to communicate here. You really want to make sure people walk away, right, on this partnership front, knowing that you have their back and that, yes, they own security. Everyone has a helping hand in security, but you're there to help them. So outcome 3, this is automated vulnerability discovery, right? So if we rewinded the clock back to my cultural influence slide, there's that picture about vulnerability flaw enumeration, right? And then the security controls and then cultural influence. In this case, right, this is how you scale vulnerability identification. You'll probably, and this is like an anecdote, right? Random percentage, so to speak. It really depends on your environment and your tech stack, but you'll probably get somewhere like 95-ish%, let's just say, in terms of vulnerabilities discovered through your automated mechanisms. And this picture really kind of shows you how a typical CI/CD system is put together and where you want to do some of those security checks. We don't necessarily need to dissect this per se, piece by piece, but really at a fundamental level, there are a few things that you want to look for. The first one, which I don't think I've ever worked anywhere where this hasn't been a problem, but secrets and source control. That's a one that comes up a lot, and there's a lot of great open source tools out there, like Trufflehog, that can help you in finding those. But implementing those in your CI/CD system is really great. Infrastructure as code, so like looking at your Terraform or CloudFormation for things like excessive access or policies or roles that you wouldn't expect to have created, perhaps, like really trying to come up with like guardrails and looking at those types of guardrails in your actual CI/CD system before the change is affected in reality. And then open source vulnerabilities. So there's a terminology for this called SCA, so software composition analysis. That's really looking at a few angles of open source. So you're doing that type of check as well inside of here. You're looking at licensing. You're looking at known vulnerabilities. You're looking at potentially patterns that would be indicative of backdoors, all happening ideally in your CI/CD system. And again, there are tools that can help you do that. Deprecated functions. So like this falls under like standard linting. You're looking for things that, hey, you shouldn't be using this function that's been a deprecated authorization function. That's something you could also implement. Or missing a function call altogether. Like maybe that like every API needs to have authentication, and you see that your code, one of your pieces of code isn't decorated with the authentication check. So you could look for that as well. I obviously list a number of other things in this diagram. This is feel free to take a screenshot and take a closer look at this if you'd like. So just kind of going a little bit deeper on automated vulnerability discovery, because yes, anybody can not anybody, but most people can go and find tools and implement them in the CI/CD system, right? There's tons of documentation that help you do that. But where the rubber meets the road, right, is providing really actionable, timely feedback to developers as code is merged, right? Or even before that. So there's really like two approaches to this. There's like high signal, low noise, and low noise, high signal. If you're a security engineer and practitioner, maybe you want to go in your vulnerability assessment, right, with the low signal, high noise approach, where you can filter and go through the vulnerabilities yourself. But if you're a developer and you don't necessarily have that context or that time, you really want to be provided the most relevant findings as it relates to the technology and the environment that you operate in. So high signal, low noise is a really great way to drive accuracy, right? And have a metric, right? It isn't just, okay, I look for vulnerabilities. It's I look for high and critical vulnerabilities in the most accurate way possible, and support that with a mechanism, right, to get feedback, out of the system and from people that are using it on the regular, right? False positives occur, right? False negatives occur, things that you're missing. You need to be able to reconcile those on an ongoing basis. And if you've shifted security left, so to speak, or you are doing that, you have those things in place. You're having those outcomes. Additionally, right, the exhaust, so to speak, from the system helps you in a multitude of ways. But really, I think there are two that I want to quickly talk about that I've seen, as outcomes. And the first is, this like cycle of improvement, right? Where your automation's in place, it's finding vulnerabilities, it's doing it accurately. Maybe it's cross-site scripting, maybe it's cross-site request forgeries, whatever it might be. But the better that you get at finding these vulnerabilities in an automated fashion, right, and fixing them, the harder it is to find them, right? So it then increases it improves effectively like your manual processes. So like your pen test, apparatus needs to also kind of like look for other things and put their focus elsewhere and find vulnerabilities that maybe they wouldn't have normally found, or think about things that they wouldn't have normally thought about, which goes and finds new attack paths, new vulnerabilities that you can go automate the detection for potentially. So it's this kind of like, your automation improves, your manual processes improve, your automation improves, your manual processes improve. And if you're doing this accurately and you have the mechanisms to support it, then you're in a good spot. So moving right along here, outcome 4. So this is a really broad one, but continuous cybersecurity program improvement. And I footnote this with threat modeling, right? Like the key here is the threat modeling. So folks call this different things at different places, but doing that design review and thinking about the threat scenarios is great. But I think I discussed earlier, you have an output, which is a security requirement that you could create a ticket for, where you're saying, I need to account for XYZ threat with ABC control and, by a certain date or whatever. So you can do a number of things with that piece of information, right? You can start to categorize it in a common way and then use it as a leading indicator to tie back to lagging indicators, right? What that means is, how many requirements am I finding on an ongoing basis that I can create a standard library for? Or, how many requirements have I set that were accepted or unaccepted in a risk management process? Or how many threats are common across all my threat models, right? Like even just like threat categorization. How many controls am I recommending? If authorization is ubiquitous control, right? Again, going back to standardization, maybe that's an area where you can calculate time savings and cost savings. And lastly, like, you're creating these kind of attack maps, so to speak, right? The picture I showed earlier, where that depicted the inside out and the outside in practice in a threat model, right? Like that is a map, right? And you could hand that over to your pen testing team or your red team, and they could run with that, right? So it reduces time to get up to speed on scoping or figuring out a pen test plan, right? So it creates efficiency across a number of different avenues. I don't. The picture here kind of are the ones that I thought of, and I'm sure there are more. Right, it's non exhaustive list. Okay. So one last thing, I talked about a kind of continuous feedback loop about automated and manual vulnerability identification. Improving one another, and I think like there's a big similarity here as it relates to like threat modeling, where you get really good at doing your threat models, right, which helps you prevent common attack paths, which leads to people finding other attack paths, right, other vulnerabilities, and that allows you to discover those and understand them and account for them in your threat model, right? You want to be doing this on an ongoing basis. You don't want to be one and done. Like threats change all the time. Your code's probably changing all the time. The vulnerabilities that are associated with your code is definitely changing over time. So keeping this relevant and up to date and on an incremental, continuous basis is really a strong outcome that I've seen from doing this for a number of years. So I think like just the last note here, right? It's kind of a repeat of what I just said, but I really want you to take this away, right? Like you're never going to account for everything, and it's kind of a journey to get everything that you can possibly enumerated. So keep working on it. One of the techniques I've seen work really well around like you can't possibly do this for everything in an organization. So like coming up with criticality ratings for your assets is important. So that allows you to be able to know when to revisit something if it hasn't changed. But if you're shifting left and you're having strong partnerships, you'll be doing this on an ongoing basis, right, with your partners as they continue to develop. Okay, the last one, security engineering innovation, right? I think what this really means to me, right, is removing like, or at least like keep like earmarking a piece of time and somebody's agenda, so to speak, for a sprint or a couple of weeks or whatever it might be, to think about the systems and everything that's going on holistically, right? You have very smart engineers working on your team. They're very much in demand, right? You want to keep them engaged. You don't want to give them too much operational work, operational churn. If you have too much operational work, you need to start considering alternatives, right? Do you need to build an operations team? Do you need to, get better at documentation, right? So that they can focus on the bigger picture. I quoted Sir Richard Branson here. I'll say it aloud. Complexity is your enemy. Any fool can make something complicated. It's hard to make something simple, right? And to me, that resonated. If you think about security controls in general, there's an inverse relationship between security and usability, right? Like you could have everything open, and that's very usable, or you could have everything closed and then it's not usable at all, right? So if you think about even just the network firewall for a moment, it's got a whole bunch of filtering rules, right? IP restrictions or whatever it might be, ports, protocols. And with every exception in that list is complexity you have to keep track of, right? So, thinking about your controls, thinking about your systems, someone needs to do that, and your security engineers are best suited to do it, right? And I give a few other examples here too, right? How do you detect hard to detect things, broken access control, right? How do you detect or eliminate complete vulnerability classes, right? Maybe it's possible. I'm not sure. At least you could try to at least severely reduce them in your environment and keep track of it. So these are questions that a team could potentially answer over time, but you really need to allocate the time to do that, right? So give your capable security engineers time to innovate. And giving your engineers time to innovate could really be a gift. And I think one of the interesting things, other than a lot of I've seen just like anecdotally, a lot of great security folks go and do their own thing, build their own security product, right? Maybe they could have done that internally at a company, So I really think that this is a time, this is the place, right, for security leadership to really be thinking about how they could get the most out of their employees, and really create a safe environment to do so. Right, they have to have that time allocated, and you as a leader need to make sure that they could do it safely. Give them the room to take risk. Remove obstacles from their way. And I have a quote down here from Simon Sinek, who's a leadership writer. He said, when we create an environment where people feel like they belong, we create circles of safety, collaboration, trust, and innovation thrives. And I thought that was really, a really great quote to tie into this. Takeaways from this talk. What are you going to walk away from? So I hope you can walk away from this talk with at least this one thing, right? You cannot. I mean, maybe you can. I don't know. There are things outside of this universe that escape me, right? And my knowledge, but as far as I know, you can't shift any further left than the human brain, right? If you get people actively thinking about security before they go and build or develop or create something new, that's the right time to do it, right? And if you've got them doing that, I don't want to say you've completely won. You haven't completely won, but you've accomplished something that's very hard to accomplish, right? That cultural influence, being able to say, we design with security in mind, right? That secure by design principle. And if your organization can operate that in that way, you're going to have a really strong outcome, right? And threat modeling is core to that. It always has been for me in my experience, and I've seen some really great collaboration on all sorts of different scenarios. Well, I know this piece or that piece. Turning it into a game. There's a lot of great ways to make this engaging and fun, and it helps people build the muscle memory, right? So that when they are going to do something new, that security is top of mind. So, and the last thing here, right? There's been some situations in my career where it felt a little bit like us versus them, right? We're not on the same page as it relates to building infrastructure and doing that with security. It's like, I need to build my infrastructure, security needs to get out of the way, or product or software, whatever, insert your technology thing of choice here. But I'll leave this at this last bullet here. It should never be like us versus them. It should be a trusting partnership where there's push and pull, but everyone's on the same page, right? We're all working together on it. Takeaway number 2, and 4, FYI. So use threat modeling outputs to help mature your cybersecurity program as a whole. Again, right? Like, you can and you should have a standard format to document your requirements. Again, tying other processes back to them to build those KPIs, right? We avoided a risk, right? And it could have been a realized risk because we saw attacks in from a certain vulnerability class, but because we had this control, we implemented it. We avoided catastrophe or whatever, right? You could start to do that, right, and paint that picture for the business, and you can get better at alerting and detecting things as well, right? I think like some of the best, at least, most definitely the in terms of security relationships inside of security teams, like building a really good relationship with like my incident response and detection management teams has always been something that I've strived to do, because we're thinking about the unhappy paths, and they are too, and doing that together. Like I forget who this is from, but like 1 + 1 = 3. You can really have a great outcome. So number 3, you can eliminate vulnerability classes or at least severely reduce them. I said that earlier, and it's because of that continuous cycle of threat modeling and closing down potential attack paths, and really, if you have the threat modeling down, the automation down, the testing and the manual processes down, where you're doing all of that as early as possible in in looking at the running environment, like basically everything that happens in the running environment, if you've missed something, becomes essentially an incident, right? Like it isn't like, oh, I didn't know about that, right? Maybe you didn't, maybe you did, but you at least have a way to feed that back into the ecosystem as a whole. Oh wow, we missed that. Like there was some attack here, or there was some incident here that could have bit us or whatever. And now you have a way to account for that because you're already threat modeling. You already have all of the other mechanisms in place to keep track of all of this data, essentially. So, really, I think that the last note here, right? It's impossible. I don't want to say impossible. Nothing's impossible, but to eliminate something completely means like you've removed it, right? So I think that, again, like going back to measurements, you can really come up with interesting measurements, right, that allow you to say on an ongoing basis, like we want to achieve 99% compliance to this, and you could track it over time. Really, this is an aspirational thing. It isn't something that you're going to do like overnight. Like you have to work at this. Well, most everything in this presentation is that way. But yeah, so the last one, your best engineers are creative and innovative. Like leverage that, right? Like I said, remove obstacles, unnecessary work streams. Be a shield. If you're a security leader, you need to protect your team and help them prioritize. Give them projects and goals that they want to work on, right? That they find interesting and want to explore. Set a time. A month where you can do this on an ongoing basis if you can't. And lastly, right, giving them too much operational work will ultimately lead to potential attrition. So you want to avoid that. You want to give them the room to find areas to simplify. Okay, that's it for me. I hope you found this useful. If you want to learn more, head over to my blog. Lots of great contributions on there from other folks other than myself. Great peer reviews. So please reach out, get engaged, and I really appreciate you taking the time. Thank you so much.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
Hey everybody, happy Tuesday. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here now with the headlines. First up on DevOps.com is an article that looks at internal developer portals and why organizations need them. One main advantage of the cloud is that it offers developers flexibility and a self-service solution. Instead of having to contact the central infrastructure team whenever a dev team needs a new server or cluster, the dev team can do it themselves through a simple web UI. This change drastically improves productivity. But there's a caveat. Most companies don't actually want to use the default portals provided by cloud providers. There are a few reasons for this: security, simplicity, or the need for a custom company-specific options, to name a few. That's why we now see a move toward internal developer portals. This post delves into what internal developer portals are and the many ways in which they can make developers' lives easier. And we have news from Pulumi, which is making its Pulumi cross-code translation technology available to third parties and DevOps teams. The technology was developed to integrate a wide range of programming languages with its infrastructure as code platform. The company has also added support for YAML, which is widely used to configure Kubernetes environments, as well as any variant of Java. It already supports .NET, Node.js, Go, and Python programming languages. These changes were announced at the recent Pulumi Up online conference, where the company also added packages for Oracle Cloud, Databricks, and Event Store that simplify deployments on those platforms. Pulumi already provides similar integrations for AWS, Microsoft Azure, Google Cloud, Kubernetes, Auth0, Cloudflare, Confluent Cloud, Datadog, DigitalOcean, Docker, GitHub, Kong, MinIO, MongoDB, Atlas, PagerDuty, Snowflake, Spot by NetApp, and Sumo Logic. That's quite a handful. There are also now components that provide support for container applications, Kubernetes clusters, and serverless applications, along with an AWS Cloud Development Kit. Also on DevOps.com, Synopsys plans to add dynamic application security testing tools to its software as a service platform in the wake of its acquisition of White Hat Security from NTT Security Corp for approximately $330 million in cash. The deal was announced last week. The DAST tools will complement the existing static, interactive, and software composition analysis tools that Synopsys currently provides. The goal is to provide an end-to-end application security platform, including consulting, to help organizations better secure software supply chains. All right, over on Container Journal, we look at running Postgres in Kubernetes environments. PostgreSQL is an open source project that has concretely contributed to innovation in the database management industry for at least the last 2 decades. Built on the solid foundations of database science, over time, PostgreSQL has become one of the most popular database management systems in the world, especially in virtualized and bare metal installations. Historically, running a database like PostgreSQL inside Kubernetes has been seen as an anti-pattern, as the initial evolutionary phase of the most popular container orchestration system was primarily focused on elastic stability of stateless applications. However, the trend has been changing since the introduction of local persistent volumes in Kubernetes 1.14 and the increasing adoption of the operator design pattern to help manage complex applications by extending the Kubernetes controller with custom resources. Openly governed groups like the Data on Kubernetes community are also contributing to raise general awareness of running stateful workloads like databases in Kubernetes. This article looks at some of the many reasons why it makes sense for organizations to run Postgres in Kubernetes environments and the benefits that doing so can provide. And we have the latest from Buoyant, which has added a service for managing instances of the open source Linkerd service mesh that is based on agent software it has developed. While Linkerd is easier to deploy than other service mesh offerings, there are many organizations that still prefer to rely on a managed service for service mesh. The managed service, available in private beta, is an extension of the Buoyant Cloud platform that provides a control plane for managing multiple instances of Linkerd. That service automates tasks such as upgrades, installations, and rollbacks. All right, over on Security Boulevard, we take a look at the commitment made by Google, Apple, and Microsoft on World Password Day last week to building support for passwordless sign-in capabilities based on authentication technologies advanced under the oversight of the FIDO Alliance. They plan to implement the framework to simplify application of the authentication framework across Android, iOS, and macOS and Windows operating systems, as well as Chrome, Safari, and Edge browsers. The announcement is part of an ongoing effort to eliminate the need to rely on passwords. Credentials are routinely stolen by cybercriminals who use a wide range of social engineering and brute force techniques. Today, there are millions of username and password combinations listed for sale on the dark web, enabling cybercriminals to automate the process of posing as someone else to access a website or an application. The FIDO Alliance is an industry consortium that aims to advance an alternative to passwords based on a universal second factor, a FIDO Universal Authentication Framework, and FIDO 2, a set of specifications. Going forward, devices and browsers will store a FIDO credential, called a passkey, that employs cryptography to access an account. When a user signs into a website, a prompt will also appear on a nearby mobile device. If a device is lost, passkeys will securely sync to a user's new phone via a cloud backup. And finally, Keeper Security has launched a remote access gateway that provides secure access from endpoints via any web browser. Keeper Connection Manager, or KCM, uses remote access technology based on the open source Apache Guacamole protocol the company gained with the acquisition of Glyptodon earlier this year. In effect, KCM adds a secure layer above transports like SSH from any web browser. That approach is unique because it enables zero trust security without the need to deploy client or agent software. Instead, KCM is integrated with the Keeper Vault platform to securely provide access to infrastructure without requiring organizations to manage passwords. Credentials are encrypted and centrally managed via role-based access control policies in a way that doesn't expose them to individuals managing the IT environment. Users can be authenticated using multiple factors, such as FIDO2 hardware keys and biometrics. Basically, KCM enables a zero-knowledge architecture that the company said should make it easier for organizations to pass a security audit. And that is it for the headlines. Please check back with me on, I believe it's Thursday this week, perhaps, maybe next Monday. I'll have a fresh new batch for you. Until then, I hope everybody has a great day, and please, whatever you do, stay safe.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Techstrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here now with Jose Costa, who is the Chief Information Security Officer at Tugboat Logic by OneTrust. Tugboat Logic, I love the name of that company. Jose, thank you so much for joining me today. Really do appreciate it.
Thank you, Charlene. Thank you for having me.
Very great, no problem. So I want to talk to you a little bit about the importance of cybersecurity training throughout an organization. But before we get started on that topic, I was wondering if you could introduce us to Tugboat Logic by OneTrust.
Yeah, very quickly, in case you haven't heard about us, Tugboat Logic is a SaaS platform that really helps organizations be compliant with different security standards and different compliance requirements and privacy and security requirements. So we make it very easy for you to adopt those frameworks, and we have some automation in order to collect what you need to collect and demonstrate it either to a third party or to your board or to your management. All
right. Cool. Yeah. I love that. I love that idea. It sounds like, you guys are making compliance easy for organizations. So
that's right.
Always a big plus, especially in today's cybersecurity conscious. Well, yeah, we're all cybersecurity conscious, but some of us aren't actually practicing cybersecurity as well as they should. Which actually is a great seg into our conversation, which is cybersecurity training and why it's so important
for the entire company to kind of embrace cybersecurity from a, not only from an educational perspective, but also day-to-day operational perspective. So I'm interested in maybe hearing from you about what your views are on this topic, especially as it relates to the importance or the impact, I should say, of cybersecurity training on the company as a whole. What are, maybe what are some of the benefits, but kind of walk me through the topic a little bit.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think cybersecurity training or cybersecurity awareness in general, like it's not only important at an organizational level, but at a personal level, right? I mean, we're living a time where everybody like is using technology like day to day, right? Like, I mean, I have 2 young kids, and they still don't have a cell phone. They're still young, but I think I'm surprised that's not a topic that comes out more often, even at school.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to get them ready. I'm gonna have to explain a lot of things to them, and some of the things, and the same applies to an organization, right? If you had to pick a couple of things to do around cybersecurity, and I would definitely choose spend your money on awareness training and patching. That's the other big one, right? But if you look at the most common hacks or cybersecurity issues, or cybersecurity problems that organizations have, 90% of them are because of those two things, right? Human error, like somebody doing the wrong thing or clicking the wrong thing when they shouldn't have, or lack of patching, right? And those are two things that really are key. Like the key thing to understand, and what I like to highlight when we run cybersecurity programs internally in any organization, right, is that you're not as a CISO, you're not the only person responsible for cybersecurity. The whole organization, everybody, every single person has a say and has a responsibility, right? And if you can really get down to that and get that message in people's heads, right, and they feel like they own it and they have something to say, and you empower them, right, half the battle is won, right?
Yeah. Well, it's obviously on one level, it makes a lot of sense because everybody, we're being constantly bombarded by security threats and phishing and other, social engineering tactics these days. Everybody is at risk. But I think there's still this kind of overarching thought that cybersecurity is not my job. It's not, I'm in charge of, collecting paper bags, or I'm in charge of, filling out spreadsheets. It's not my job to make sure that I'm secure. That's the security team's job. So, is that's obviously an attitude that's got to change, but in some organizations, that's a difficult thing to happen. So, what do you? What would you advise? Companies that really aren't that still kind of take that siloed approach to cybersecurity, especially among their employees.
It is. No, you're totally right. It is still a thing, and we don't realize, right? Like as users, like we still, in many cases, right, you still get people complaining about some of the security measures that you put in place, right, as an organization, right? Like it's stopping me from doing my job, or why can't I just use this service to upload my files and share them with whoever I want, or why can't I just bring my laptop and connect it to my network, these type of things, right? It's as security professionals, it's our job to make people's life easier. I don't think we're here to tell people what to do, what not to do, right? We're here to enable the business and, make the business aware of the risks, right? And really set up some safeguards, right, around them, right? But again, it goes back to empowering the final user, everybody in the organization, right? Made them realize that at the end of the day, it ends up, right, on their hand, right? If it could be as easy as, sending an email with the wrong information, right? It could be sending the wrong file to the wrong person. It could be, letting your kids play with your work computer just because they need to, finish an assessment, right? And they are connecting to a unsecure wireless network and a coffee shop, and they do something they shouldn't do, right? So it's these little things. And what I would say to organizations that still have this siloed approach, like start at the top, right? Tone at the top is the key on this, right? If you're running these cybersecurity programs and awareness programs and your boss, right, is just, this is a waste of time, done. Is it really mandatory? Like, hey, focus on this first, do the important stuff first. This is not important. That's where everything falls down, right, and falls apart, right? We talk a lot right now about security by design, privacy by design, right?
Yeah.
That starts with, establishing all those baseline, right, at the people, processes, and technology levels, and building from there, right? Thinking about it, security cannot be an afterthought, right? And that tone at the top is what drives that behavior, right?
So it's interesting, and it's kind of it's an interesting kind of situation, because we keep talking about the fact that organizations need to make security kind of a top priority among, not just in what they say, but also what they do. And it needs to come from every level in the company. At the same time, we've got security companies that are I don't know how to say it in a nice way. They're saying that they want to offer approaches to security that are transparent, basically, that it runs, and the employees or the users don't even know that it's running, but it's securing them. It's almost like there's like, okay, security is great, but we don't actually want you to see what's going on, or we don't want to, and I don't, it almost seems like a conflicting statement sometimes. I kind of feel like if you want somebody to be aware of something, you actually have to put it in their face so they can see them. And I can understand that a lot of them are saying, this is from a convenience perspective. We want to make sure that your employees are being productive, that they're not hampered by these security tools and this and that. But at the same time, are we making it too easy for folks to ignore security because we are kind of making it run in the background, or putting it kind of not in the spotlight, if you will?
It is. I would say it is very true from a technology point of view. Like, you want everything to be seamless, right? In your personal life and at work, right? Like, you want, watching something on one screen, you want to continue watching in the next one, right? You don't want to think about having to log in again. Like, you're in a safe network and safe space, and you want to, why do you have to input your password 1,000 times when you're already here, right?
Annoying.
So, yeah. Right. And it creates this. And one of the things, that we need to consider is, like, people find a way, right? Like, you can block everything you want, and, people will find a way, and it's going to be worse, right? So you can block all the, the websites, USBs, whatever, and people will find a way to share a file that they shouldn't be sharing, and you'll be surprised. So I would, I don't think we need to stop this in terms of, like, making technology seamless and security, be there, but we do need to, we can't forget about it. I think people need to understand that security is there, that it ends up on them. And I think you're right, we need to remind them. It needs to be there, right? Like, I don't think running an awareness program is something that you do once a year. Running an awareness program is something that you need to constantly do, right? And constantly, there's different ways of addressing this, like, screensavers that pop automatically and remind you, messages. My favorite one, and I know it kind of frustrates some people, but, like, the one I like best is to have a lot of organizations have a messaging app, right? To have a channel dedicated to security, have a channel where you post, security incidents, right? Hey, this happened in this company, or this happened in this company, which is in our industry. Look what the consequences were.
Yeah.
Right. Or people can post. So I just got an email from the CEO saying this, right? Like, hey, look at the CEO's, spoofed email, right? And people talk about it because, and it creates that awareness. It's organic, right? Like, it creates this by I know I've talked to some people that in the industry that gets frustrated because they they launch this expensive phishing campaign and security awareness, and they want to get how many people they get, and then people talk to each other and they are, oh, well, be careful. I got caught with this phishing email, and then the results are skewed. But to me, that means that your organization is like it's working. They are communicating, right? Like that's what you want to happen in a real case scenario, right? If there is a real attack, you want the users to talk to each other and warn each other and hey, don't click on it. I just got this, right? Mm-hmm. So this makes security very real, in my opinion, right? So back to your point, I think the usage of technology needs to be seamless. I don't think we need to make it difficult because then we're going to create friction and resistance, right? And nobody likes it, right? Including me, right? Like I'm going to have to have my, authenticator app, like put 1,000 passwords 1,000 times. But it needs to be top of mind. Security needs to be top of mind. And to achieve that, you need to be thinking about running this awareness program either through emails or, this messaging app, as I mentioned. My favorite one, but
I think it's a great idea. We recently had a spate of a smishing campaign. So so somebody came to my office, and we're not a huge company, but we have a fair number of people came to my office and showed me her phone. Said, "Did you send this to me?" And I said, "No." 5 minutes later, I got the same thing, but from another person in the company. So, this person was, whoever was behind it was targeting all of, within a select group within the company. So we immediately posted it on our general Slack channel saying, if you're getting a text from us, it's not us. Ignore it, report it, ignore it. That made everybody in the company all over the country, because we have locations, or we have people located in many, many different areas. They were all on alert to stay clear of these messages. So I do agree that awareness is key. And I wonder, how effective do you think that is with companies that are maybe larger in size, that, if you have a Slack channel, that's one thing that's dedicated to security that everybody can look at. Do you think that that's more effective in smaller companies, or does it really matter?
No, I think large companies, this example, it's perfect, right? You don't even have a security professional alerting the rest of the company, right? Like it's happening organically, right? Like it's, look what happened to me, right? Like somebody sent this, right? Like, is this real? Can we confirm? I think organizations of like any size can benefit from this. I don't think it's a size problem at all, right? I think this approach would, obviously larger organizations, larger budgets. Mm-hmm. Everybody's remote these days. You got to think a little bit different. But, if you're in the office, you have posters. You may want to run different programs for different people, right? You have, somebody dealing with customers. You want to, maybe have different training about, privacy and implications of sharing certain data with some customers and so on, right? And then somebody dealing in the back end of things, right? You may want to have, other type of awareness training. But I think the messaging, the constant awareness, it's something that works any size, right? Any size of organizations.
Yeah, and you touched on the idea of having different types of training depending on maybe the different departments in an organization, or just the kind of the maybe the location of the people, which I think is important also, because people, if I start talking to, if I'm a cybersecurity professional, I'm talking to somebody in the marketing department about FINRA rules or personally identifiable information. It's like, they're not really, it's like, it's not my, I don't really deal in that. So I'm really not going to pay attention. But if you talk about privacy concerns related to email blasts and things like that, obviously that's going to hit a note with them. So I do agree that we do need to, make sure that the messaging is clear and actually makes sense to the person you're delivering it to.
Right. It's, it's explaining it. It's as security professionals, you're not just, sitting in a chair and looking at, technology. You need to understand the business and who you're talking to, right? I mean, these days, like huge, huge thing, right? Like vendor management, right? Like, I mean, everybody outsource something. There is an application for everything, Right. Understand before you do any assessment, you don't just do a blanket assessment of a vendor, right? You need to understand like who's going to use it, like what are they going to use it, what type of data they have, where is that data, right? You're not just, hey, fill up this form, send it back to me, right? Really understanding what the business groups are doing, what are the key risks, and bringing it up from a risk point of view, making it real to them, right? Like making it feel like, hey, this is real. I mean, as an example, we have one of our data centers in Europe for customers that want to have a European data center for
data sovereignty,
not right. Our a lot of the customer success team is in North America, right? So one of the things in the last training, I was talking to them about, well, although the data center is located in Europe, right? Like the fact, accessing that data, reading it, it's considered an international data transfer, right? Which it doesn't come to mind to a regular person, right? It's like the data's there. If I look at it from North America, why would it be an international data transfer? But it is, right? Based on the legislation. So that's the things that it makes it very real to them, right? So it makes it so you better talk to your customers before you access any data, right? You better ask for permission. You better, right? Because they care about these things, right? And marketing. As you said, they won't care all this. They don't even have access to those systems, right?
Exactly.
You gotta talk to them about, hey, be careful who you send an email to, right? Make sure you have,
Exactly.
So
Yeah. So it's good stuff. And I think if organizations pay more attention to not just who they're teaching as far as the cybersecurity awareness training, but also the messaging that comes across, I think it's going to go a lot farther within the organization. Do you think how do you think we're doing overall when it comes to cybersecurity awareness training? How do you think, just as a whole, is in the market?
I think there is obviously a lot. I think there is a lot to do. I think there is a lot to do. I think the news are helping. I think there is more awareness of the danger overall, right? You hear about the implications, but I think we still don't see the real consequences, right? I mean, it just goes down, right, to the the approach that we take personally, right? Like if it's annoying to put a password on your phone, right? And you're like, oh, right, or just accepting the terms of service of any apps we download and social media, right? Like if we're willing to share our personal information, like it's nothing, right? And it's like worth nothing. What does it say about the organizational information that like are we going to do the same for a company? So I think there's definitely more to do, right? And again, I see it with my kids personally, and I haven't started yet. They use technology, of course. They still don't have their own, but I think there is a lot more to do. I think we're behind.
Yeah, well, hopefully that will be changing. I don't think it's ever going to change. I think we're always going to be kind of lagging when it comes to cybersecurity, but I hope we're going to get better at certain things. Hopefully we'll get better at everything, but the best we can hope for is to get better at the most important things. But we'll see. We'll see how things go. I want to say thank you so much for taking the time and having the conversation with me. Was a genuine pleasure, and thank you very much for sharing your insights. I do believe that cybersecurity training at all levels of an organization and to every employee is super, super important because it really can benefit the company in so many different ways. So thanks for having the conversation with me. I do appreciate it.
Absolutely. And again, thank you for having me here.
Thank you. All right, everybody, please stick around. We've got lots more Techstrong TV coming up, so stay tuned.
Disruption is occurring across every aspect of IT. Open source, cloud services, DevOps, and cloud-native software architectures are democratizing IT and radically transforming how business is done. The old ways of creating software and doing IT are being replaced with agile, flexible, faster, and cheaper methods, benefiting vendors and users alike. Accelerated Strategies Group is out to democratize access of industry expertise and knowledge. We use our expertise and experience to offer insightful, intelligent, useful information in a variety of formats relevant to the IT community, digital events, videos, reports, assessments, workshops, and implementation projects with tech vendors, IT organizations, and business leaders. We widely and openly share our work products, often for free. Analyst reports these days aren't worth more than a graph or chart that tells a story or illustrates a market trend. We work with developers, DevOps teams, cloud architects, security engineers, and transformation leaders most every day, creating and implementing transformational strategies and technologies. We're not just thinkers, we're also doers.
Hey, everybody. Hope everybody's having a great day so far. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here now with the webinars preview. I always tell you we have so many great webinars coming up on DevOps.com, Container Journal, and Security Boulevard. I got 3 here that are coming up in the next week or so. So hopefully you will be able to mark your calendar and join us because these are going to be some good ones. The first one is called Applying the 2022 OSSRA Findings to Software Supply Chain Risk Management. This one is happening Tuesday, May 17th at 1 p.m. Eastern on Security Boulevard. This is, like I said, this is going to be a good one, folks. This one is sponsored by Synopsys. Now, according to the 2022 Open Source Security and Risk Analysis, or OSSRA report, the overwhelming majority of software development organizations are leveraging open source to build their applications. However, the scale of use creates a growing management challenge. While development and risk management teams scramble to patch vulnerabilities, decipher complex license terms governing obligations associated with the use of each open source component, and stay up to date with component versions, another consideration begs attention. How does this open source risk affect my software supply chain? So in this webinar, they'll be discussing what a software supply chain looks like, how open source introduces risk to a software supply chain, and how to apply the OSSRA findings to reduce your software supply chain risk. Good one. All right, the second one is called Shift Left Done Right. This one is happening Wednesday, May 18th at 11 a.m. Eastern on DevOps.com. This one is sponsored by Checkpoint. In today's world, all major processes are automated: coding, build, testing, monitoring, deployment, and the compute layer. Servers come and go, and storage is allocated within minutes. The sheer complexity of keeping up with the pace of the entire software development lifecycle requires us to come up with a technology that can tame the complexity of security in such a rapidly changing tech world and enable more people to become security experts. So in this webinar, the folks at Checkpoint will discuss how organizations can shift security left while also making it technologically accessible. Another good one there. All right, the third one is called Defending Against Emerging Ransomware Threats. This one is happening Monday, May 23rd. This one is at 1 p.m. Eastern on Security Boulevard. As ransomware attacks and attackers become more sophisticated, cybercriminal gangs will rely less on broad-based attacks and more on remote code execution using malware design for specific targets. Cybercriminals who launch ransomware attacks are becoming much more efficient. So this editorial webinar features a lineup of all-star guests offering their perspective on the current security landscape and how ways in which organizations can best protect themselves against ransomware and other threats. Good stuff. All right, that's it for the webinar's preview. Please check back with me next time. I will have a fresh new batch for you. Until then, I hope everybody has a great day, and please, whatever you do, stay safe.
All right, we're back. Next up, we've got The View with Vizard. And in this one, Mike Vizard speaks with Phylum president Pete Morgan. They discuss $15 million in financing that Phylum recently achieved or recently received, and how the company is planning to use it to automate software supply chain security. Definitely a very relevant conversation given all of the cybersecurity issues we've been having with software supply chains. So let's go ahead and roll it now.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Pete Morgan, who's president of Phylum. They are a company that specializes in securing software supply chains, and they just raised $15 million. Pete, congratulations.
Thank you so much, and thanks for having me on.
We have gone from a time when nobody talked about securing software supply chains to now where it feels like everybody's talking about that. So what has changed, and what ultimately will differentiate somebody in this space?
Several things, really. So there's been an explosion in the amount of available software developers can use from package managers to build their software on top of. We just did a cursory analysis of a really popular package manager like NPM. In 2015, it had about 12,000 packages total. Today, it's almost 2 million, and it's growing at an increasing rate. So on one hand, we have just an explosion in the amount of software. Also, there's no restrictions on who can release a package, right? Anybody can do it. It is open source. So anyone can write anything and put it on these package managers, which is a good thing, but also can be a problem. And then finally, the last piece was really the automation. To like a DevOps or DevSecOps model is on the way there now, basically. And using these types of things in automation has really uncovered a lot more of the issues and the potential risk of functionally using untrusted software in automation to build our products. So that's kind of really the biggest things that change. And that's really happened, mostly over the last 5 years, and we're seeing the effects of that now.
There are all kinds of dependencies in those supply chains. So how do I keep track of what's being used where and how secure it may or may not be?
It is a onerous question. If you think about what a software developer does, they are seeking to build some sort of feature or a product or some capability in software. And if they can use libraries in a productive way to do so, it lets them go a lot faster. So we see everyone kind of moving that direction. They'll ask for a library to do something, and they have some amount of control over what versions they want to use of that library. If that library has dependencies, and those dependencies have dependencies, and et cetera, which many, many do now, we see, gargantuan dependency graphs. You don't have as much control over what the dependencies of your dependency may be. Those are defined by the author that wrote the library you're using. So these things change out from under us quite a bit, a lot more than many people are aware of. So on one hand, it is a question of kind of asset identification, right? Like, what are the things I'm using here right now today? But you also have to consider that as you move forward and the build you do in a week or a month, even if you haven't changed anything, you might get different software because the packages underneath have changed. And that's a huge problem. And it's not super clear to many of the people we talk to how frequently that happens. And one of the reasons why we're building products to police the supply chain and identify these issues for you automatically, so you don't have to worry about this. There's enough other things that developers and security teams are focused on. To have to go manually review millions of packages is a non-starter.
Do you have some way of crawling the environment to find out what's going on, or are we using machine learning algorithms, or how does this work?
Yeah. So as packages are released, so think about a new package goes into NPM or PyPy for Python, or maybe just a new version. The moment that happens, we download everything we can for that package. That includes the package from the package manager, all the metadata, the version control system. So if it has like a GitHub link or a GitLab link, we'll pull all the source code and all the revision history, everything we can find about that package. That gets all structured and processed in our system. And then we use machine learning algorithms, heuristics, and analytics to comb through all that data to produce evidence values about things that are happening on this package. Then we stitch those together, kind of like Sherlock Holmes at a crime scene, with the idea that he can observe more things and see these like low indicators that tend to come together, and he can figure out what happened. We're looking for all of the data so we can see all sorts of low indicators to connect together to form high indicators and then derive risk from it. And this all has to happen in automation because it's a fantastic amount of work, and you can't scale to the amount of packages that are released unless you can do it in automation. I think last month we looked at just through our evaluation of new packages released, about 100,000 packages, because that's how many were released, right? And that's numbers going up. So the need for automation is kind of increasing.
Mm-hmm. A lot of times a developer will use an older version of a piece of software, and that may happen for any number of reasons, but can I get an alert the minute that happens if it shouldn't be the right version, or how smart can Smart get?
Yeah, great question. So it turns out that the majority of projects we see are using some version of older packages. The issue then becomes, is an upgrade to a newer version of the package an improvement? In most cases, that's true. Not in 100% though. So the goal there is to really have understanding on, for each version in a given set of packages, right? So you have a one package with multiple versions. What is the right upgrade path? What will steer you out of the minefield most effectively? And that's something the automation really works for. As we generate all of this risk information, we build issues for developers and security teams to understand what the problems are, so they can have clarity on why this is an issue. But then also we build a package score, which is kind of like a credit score. So it's a numeric value we can fold some of these smaller indicators into gradually that may not bucket well into the kind of security high, medium, low classifications, so to speak. And that allows us to kind of build more policy and use more automation to enforce those scores. So you can say, I don't want a package with this, I don't want no packages in this project with a score under 70. And if that happens, we can send an alert, we can send an email, we can break a build, potentially push it back to the developer and say, this isn't allowed, right? There's a lot of guardrails we can put in to enforce that in automation.
Mm-hmm. Invariably, it seems like somebody will, quote unquote, discover a zero-day vulnerability of some type or another on a Friday at around 4:00 in the afternoon, usually, right? And kind of ruins everybody's weekend. And then we spend months looking for this thing. And I talked to some folks, and they're still looking for Log4 shell vulnerabilities. So can we get better at finding where these instances are and understanding what needs to be updated when?
Yeah, it's necessary, right? And for different types of issues, it can be more challenging. Java has a property that sometimes packages that get released in Java software get wrapped into basically zip files and zip files of zip files of zip files. So recurring down all of those things has historically been more of a challenge, but it's just necessary, right? Log4j illustrated a capability gap for most organizations. And I think we're going to see more of that, unfortunately, just because it's too easy for attackers to go after. They're going to do the path of least resistance. And the idea of finding bugs in the millions of open source packages is a pretty fertile ground for doing so, but also things like compromising an author's credentials so they can release a malicious version of that package, which will then get downloaded and installed as part of an upgrade, is happening pretty frequently. And we're going to continue to see that because, again, it's not really that hard to mount that attack today. Getting identification is one of the first things we need to do, but then we've got to consider, once we know what those assets are, how do we manage that forward over time? What are we going to do about it? And that's one of the reasons why we started Phylum.
Mm-hmm. Who's in charge of the software supply chain security these days? Because on the one hand, you've got security teams. Then we hear a lot about shifting left and DevSecOps, and someday even developers are going to be in charge of securing their code. Who knows? But it seems like one of those things where I feel like, everybody's in charge, so nobody's in charge. So what's going on?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think in different organizations, you might see a little bit of difference, but one trend I've been really happy to see recently is that the security teams on average, especially for larger organizations, have the onus of triaging security issues and then figuring out what do we send to engineering to work on the fix or the development teams. We've seen the trend of security being very cautious with that relationship and careful to just overwhelm them with what I'll say is like low signal issues, things that maybe pop up from a scanner but aren't really well vetted. So we're seeing a trend in that being improved and that relationship being managed, which is great. The more that security is going to work with engineering, I think everyone can kind of agree that the more that's a partnership, the better that things are going to get done versus being adversarial. So right now, I'd say most of the things are popping up on the security side of the fence, but we're seeing more and more developers become interested in this because it can directly affect them, right? It's not just software they're building at work, but many developers also write personal projects or open source projects, and they're just as much, just as at risk doing that as they are at work. So it's not just focused on organizations.
One of the issues you seem to see over the years is, if I look at how spending was allocated in security, it was always thrown at the firewall, the network, and then the client and the AV. And somewhere on the back end of that bus somewhere was application security. So is that changing? Are we seeing more of a shift to increasing spending on application security versus other segments?
I think so. Especially there's been a lot of things I think that came together to contribute to this, but one of the big ones was the push to work from home. As more software lives in web applications internally and people work from home, the concept of your firewall means less. And the software that you're communicating with has to mean more because remote employees are using it, right? I think on the spend side, we're seeing a lot more work going into making high quality security tools and a lot more money being poured into that, right? So I think as we see that happen, there's going to be more chances for security tools to provide value, and there's going to be more spend on that. Finally, even companies that didn't think of themselves as software companies before, many are now. So there's that adage of software is eating the world. It really, really is, right? It's an explosion for most organizations that write software. It's increased. And with that increase is just more attack surface and more things they have to manage. So as I'm sure you're aware, the hiring shortage for security talent is getting worse and worse and worse as our comp package is going up, because there's just not enough people to cover how much software is actually being developed and managed over time.
Do you think the tenor of the conversation is going to change soon? Because historically, so far, it's been, I guess, if there's an issue, we'll educate the developers. But now we see the Biden administration mandate. And I wonder over time if the conversation may get tougher, where we're saying to developers, hey, you can't have these vulnerabilities anymore. We can track where they're coming from, and there is going to be more accountability.
That's interesting. Maybe. I think that one of the challenges to that will be hiring developers is also difficult right now. And there may be goals to, I like the idea of using tooling and objective measures of things to guide training and guide improvement. But as far as making it so carrot versus stick, right? I think we want to stay on the side of the carrot for most things. Developers do a fantastically difficult job on a daily basis, and there's a lot of people working in that area, so I think it gets more watered down than it should. But organizations that become very draconian with developers, I think, are going to have a hard time retaining talent. So I would advocate more on the carrot versus the stick.
All right, well, let's hope that's how it works out. Hey, Pete, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you so much for your time.
All right, and back to you guys in the studio.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for challenges facing the cybersecurity industry, covering all aspects of InfoSec, data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, AppSec, network and endpoint security.
All right, that rounds out today's Techstrong TV broadcast. I hope you enjoyed today's conversations and presentations and entire broadcast as much as I enjoyed bringing it to you. Just a quick reminder, tomorrow, May 11th, I will be in Dallas at the Irving Convention Center for InnoTech Dallas, which is our day-long IT and cybersecurity conference. We do these around the country, mostly in the Texas-Oklahoma area, but we are going to be expanding InnoTech out later this year to Washington, D.C. But tomorrow's event is bound to be a real showstopper, folks. We've got such a great lineup of speakers at the event. We're also going to be live streaming InnoTech, a couple of presentations from InnoTech Dallas here on Techstrong TV, so you can check out some of the presentations. I will be in Dallas, as I said. I'm hopping on a plane later on today. I'm going to be doing some interviews from InnoTech Dallas as well, so that'll be on the live stream, so please do check that out. We're also going to be doing an InnoTech Best of InnoTech virtual event later this year. So tomorrow we will be recording some of the other presentations that happened during the day, so you can check it out. But if you want to come join me in person, please, I encourage you to do so. Just head on over to the Irving Convention Center. You can register there. But if you want to register beforehand, check out the agenda and the speaker lineup. You can just go to innotechdallas.com and see for yourself why I'm gushing about this show, because it's going to be a good one, folks. And Techstrong TV will be back, I believe, on Thursday with a new episode. And I think Alan is going to be hosting that one for you, since I'll be on my way back here. But I'll be back here on next Monday with a brand new episode for you. But until then, hopefully I'll see you tomorrow. And if I don't see you tomorrow, I'll see you early next week. But until then, please, whatever you do, stay safe.